When people say this regime is too ideological, I laugh only because if they were truly committed to the ideology that they spew, their children and grandchildren wouldn't be in bikinis in yachts in Europe and the United States.
Satellite images right now are showing that the Islamic Republic is trying to dug out all those missile launchers and others. You wouldn't do that if you are negotiating with goodwill.
Look, this regime was not built to be reformed. It was not built to accept any kind of compromise or concession or to make any sort of behavioral changes.
A fanatic is a tyrant on principle and often a hypocrite in practice. We are dealing with fanatics.
Hi there. The story has been hijacked, and we need to claim it back. The Iranian people inside Iran are getting lost in all the noise. What began not long ago as a remarkably clear and urgent struggle for human rights in Iran is now being told as something far more diffuse, a story about war, strategy, oil markets, and regional alliances, about Donald Trump, Israel, and a shifting balance of power. And in that transformation of focus, something essential has been lost. The brave people who made it matter in the first place are no longer at its center. The story has been hijacked. Now, it's worth recalling that this was not originally a tale that required ideological interpretation. It did not emerge from think tanks or policy debates. It began in the streets. Millions of Iranians, disproportionately young, stepped forward to demand fundamental basics: dignity, rights, freedom. They did so as citizens, not as instruments in a geopolitical contest. And they did so knowing the cost. The story has been hijacked. What has replaced that clarity is a vocabulary that distances. We now hear about escalation, deterrence, proportionality, regional balance, and alongside that, another layer of narrative, one that frames events primarily through the lens of Western overreach, of imperialism, of the legality of American action, and of provocative social media posts from Trump. These are not irrelevant concerns, but when they become the dominant frame, they risk producing a deeply misleading picture, one in which a despotic regime that represses the Iranian people begins to appear in some corners of the discourse as a kind of embattled underdog facing external aggression. And in that reframing, the original story is displaced. The story has been hijacked, and we need to claim it back. Now, of course, the world is not obligated to focus on one crisis, and we cannot be naive enough to think everyone will put aside their own issues to come and help Iranians. After all, we're not unaccustomed to being alone. But there is a difference between a story expanding and a story being overtaken. What we're seeing now is a shift in what this is all understood to be about, from people to power. And this is not only happening in global media or Western discourse, it's in the absence of consistent insistence from those who know better. Even within the Iranian diaspora, there are voices that have contributed to this reframing by amplifying regime narratives, by introducing false equivalencies, or by prioritizing geopolitical arguments over the lived realities of people inside Iran. They've helped to muddy what was once a remarkably clear moral picture. We now have an obligation to resist this drift, to keep bringing the focus back, to remind the world clearly and repeatedly that this did not begin with war or with Trump or with regional strategy. It began with people who stood up, paid a price, and are still there, somewhere inside an internet blackout. The story has been hijacked, and we need to claim it back. It's April 16, 2026. This is Roqe. Well, hi there. Welcome to episode 431 of Roqe. Iran Rises. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. Hello to you from Toronto. Hello to you from Canada. Salam dostan aziz. Durud bar shoma. Hope you are doing okay wherever you're tuning in from around the world. So happy birthday, Roqe. Happy Tavallud, Roqe. It was 6 years ago today that we launched this program, and it's been quite a ride. It was a very different landscape just 6 years ago. Amid the onset of COVID, there were almost no podcasts about Iranian affairs, let alone the Iranian diaspora. and there were literally none in English of this type. I see it as a good thing that there is so much more programming out there now, although I should say that very few with real audiences are independent and devoid of special interests or funding that they are beholden to. So we have proudly stayed independent and will continue to do so. And we normally have a party or some kind of celebration to mark our yearly anniversary, but we're not in that vibe to do that this year. We'd rather just get to the content. But here's a quick word to say thank you to all of you out there that have supported us, have sponsored us, have come to our live shows, have shared our content, and have catapulted us to well over 45 million streams. And if you do want to support us, you can always become a regular patron of Roqe by following that Support Us button. The instructions on the main page of our website, roqemedia.com. You go to roqemedia.com and press Support Us if you're inclined, or you can give us a one-time donation there as well. Thank you again for being with us. Year 7, I guess we're starting. This is the 27th episode in our Iran Rises series, and this one entitled Who's in Charge? Now, once again, events inside Iran and around the Iranian diaspora are moving at a breakneck speed. So we should note that we're recording this episode at approximately 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time here in Toronto. This is Thursday, April 16th. It's around midnight in Iran. And so, as always, we're sharing perspectives and conversations as up to date as humanly possible. Now, coming up on this 431st edition of Roqe on our 6th anniversary, the beginning of year 7, two sharp and seasoned voices join us to cut through the noise and the narratives to ask and maybe to answer a deceptively simple question with increasingly complicated answers. Who is actually in charge right now? From the inner workings and possible fractures of the Islamic Republic, to the competing forces shaping decision-making in Washington, to the evolving and sometimes divided leadership within the Iranian diaspora. So this is a conversation about power and perception and people pulling the strings or struggling to. Lisa Daftari will join us from Los Angeles. Dr. Shahram Kholdi will be back from Southwestern Ontario for what I suspect will be a timely and revealing panel on where authority really lies and why it matters more than ever. Let's get to it. Today's episode of Roqe is brought to you in part by Stellar Law. Stellar Law is a boutique litigation firm based in Toronto, founded and led by Rana Nosrat Panah. The firm represents businesses and professionals in commercial and contractual disputes, particularly where relationships have broken down and the consequences are significant. Stellar Law's practice is grounded in careful analysis and strategic decision-making. Much of the work involves contract disputes, shareholder conflicts, and complex business disagreements that require both legal precision and practical judgment. Rana and her team are known for approaching these matters with clarity, with focus, and a deep understanding of what's at stake for their clients. For those navigating serious disputes with real commercial impact, check out Stellar Law at stellarlaw.ca. Thanks again to Rana Nosrat and the team at Stellar Law. And if you are Iranian, do note that Stellar Law operates in both English and Persian if you prefer to deal in Persian. Thanks again to Stellar Law. Let me tell you about Fam Luxy. This episode of Roqe is brought to you with the support of Fam Luxy. Fam Luxy is a cultural fashion platform dedicated to supporting and showcasing independent Iranian artists. In a time when Iranian voices and creativity face unprecedented challenges, Fam Luxy stands as a bridge bringing the spirit of Iranian craftsmanship to the world. Every creation tells a story of art, of culture, individuality. By choosing Fam Luxy, you support independent artists and meaningful design. In 2023, Fam Luxy introduced its exclusive collection, Glory Days, at New York Fashion Week, featuring the King and Queen line, an artistic tribute to 2,500 years of Iranian imperial heritage and the timeless strength of our culture. You need to get one of these items if you haven't done so already. You can discover more and order your own Fam Luxy wear at famluxy.com. Be unique by Fam Luxy. Go to famluxy.com. Thanks to Fam Luxy for honoring heritage, amplifying art, and standing with Iranians. right, let's get to our panel for episode 431. Lisa Daftari is an Iranian-American foreign policy analyst and a journalist with a focus on Middle Eastern policy and counterterrorism. She regularly provides on-air analysis and exclusive reporting on key regional and global developments. She is the founder and editor-in-chief of The Foreign Desk, an international news and U.S. foreign policy publication. She joins us from Los Angeles. And Dr. Shahram Kholdi has been a Middle East historian and political analyst who has taught international relations, the history of oil, and modern Middle Eastern politics at several universities across Canada, including the University of Waterloo. He holds a PhD from the University of Manchester, where his research focused on the politics of memory and the historiography of the 1979 Iranian Revolution. He has written and spoken extensively on Iran's contemporary political dynamics, regime narratives, and regional geopolitics, and has appeared as an expert analyst in media and policy discussions, including testimony before Canada's Foreign Affairs Committee. Dr. Shahram Kholdi joins us from Southwestern Ontario today. Hello to you both. It's good to have you both back.
Thank you.
Hello.
All right. Well, I thought I would start with the issue of human rights. I want to get to who's in charge, which is actually the title of this episode. But on human rights, it seems almost an anachronism at this point, as the world debates war and strategy and oil prices and the costs of bombs and antipathy towards Trump and Israel. It seems like an anachronism to talk about, or maybe a pipe dream, to talk about human rights atrocities at the hands of this regime in Iran. And the millions who came into the streets because of those atrocities that really started the ball rolling on all of this. Is that a pipe dream at this point for us to expect that we could inject that back into the global agenda? Lisa?
You know, when you speak about human rights in a vacuum, yes, it seems like we can't push the United States and Israel to fight this war, to collapse the regime, all the way to regime change because of human rights or because of the Iranian people who, yes, were very brave to come out onto the streets. But when you talk about it in conjunction with the current strategy, it is absolutely part of the equation. And what I mean by that is for decades, the Republicans and Democrats had Iran policy absolutely wrong, and that is why nothing was done about it. They ping-ponged back and forth. The Republicans bomb Iran. The Democrats let Iran get the bomb. And we saw that neither strategy was adequate to get to the root of the problem, which is why Donald Trump has used the third option, which is partnering with the Iranian people. If you recall, within the first hours of this war, he looked into the camera and said, "We will collapse the regime," and basically saying we will get you to the 1 yard line and then pass the baton on to the Iranian people to then nation build and create and really manifest their own destiny going forward. So I don't think it is too outside the realm of the discussion of this current war to talk about human rights, to talk about the Iranian people. And I know people are losing patience, asking where are the Iranian people? When are they going to come out onto the streets? And really, I tweeted this week that, you know, regime change happens when it happens. It doesn't sound too sophisticated, but that's exactly how history recalls or talks about things. When we read about regime change in history books years and years from now, when we read about the modern history of Iran and how their regime changed, it's not going to start with epic fury. It's not going to start with February 28th. We're going to probably start with the student uprisings of '99, or perhaps the Green Revolution of 2009, when the Iranian people first introduced themselves to the world with social media advocacy. So I do think that this is definitely part of the equation. The Iranian people very much are part of this. They're very much partnered with Israel and the United States, and I do think it will take time and patience and endurance going forward.
I'm unclear on what part of what equation they are. I mean, we know the Iranian people, as Iranian people, we're part of the equation, and we and our angst and anxiety is about the Iranian people inside Iran. But in terms of it being part of any agenda, you're absolutely right that it was that very first press conference. You know, President Trump, that was part of what he said. You know, we're and not to mention the famous tweets now, or infamous tweets saying, "We're behind you, keep going," etc. But I mean, day to day, if you looked at the Hegseth briefing this morning, there was no talk of murdered Iranians. I mean, it was maybe that's not the place for it, but I'm not seeing it regularly come up on the agenda, either from the administration or, frankly, from the American media.
Right. And I think with regards to Donald Trump or how a war is fought, look, this is foreign policy 101. You don't want to know what the adversary doesn't need to know our exact plans. And I know people are glued onto every syllable of what Donald Trump says. And what we always say, take him seriously, not literally. Right now, we're in the military phase. Even though we're in a ceasefire, the pressure is maintained. But what we've always talked about is pressure on the regime, support for the people. What is being done behind the scenes, or with regards to preparation to then bring in that third part of, again, the military equation here, which is to move forward towards regime collapse so that we can get to regime change. We're not close to
Okay.
getting there yet.
Okay.
And I know people lose their patience, but 45, 46 days of a war is nothing in comparison to what these types of operations take. I think people saw Venezuela. They very, very erroneously make that comparison. This never was a slam dunk foreign policy move. This was absolutely complex. And you're looking at a president who does not like wars. So if there's anybody who wants to rush to the end of this as quickly as possible, it's Donald Trump. I don't think that means that he will take a bad deal. I don't think that means he will squander the opportunity that's in front of him and just, give up at this point either. I do think that he will have to stay the course. Pressure maintained on the regime right now is what we will be focused on. And I do think that this is all in benefit to the
Okay.
Iranian people and ultimately what they desire out of this.
Okay. Okay. The good. Let me bring Dr. Kholdi in. Is the same opening salvo to you? Is it a pipe dream to think that we could refocus the energies and the attentions of the world on desperate and, if not historic, human rights atrocities that have taken place inside Iran in recent weeks and months? Let me go even further. Is it a failing of the Iranian diaspora that we haven't been able to keep that focus at the top of the attention of the Western audience and the media, etc.?
Thank you, Jian. First of all, having the privilege of being with Lisa here, if I may, when I was in Manchester doing my PhD, I was delighted to be invited by Lisa to follow her page on Facebook, because in my opinion, she was one of the very few journalists in the years 2005, 2006, who, without pursuing any agenda, was doing her journalistic work that was not apologetic of the reformists or of the populist Ahmadinejadists, and just focused on human rights. So we have had the present company that is journalists who have done this, who have dedicated their lives to getting the word across without allowing it to be filtered by Human Rights Watch or Amnesty International, and without disparaging, casting upon them any disparaging criticism. I must say that they have followed a certain agenda which was not exactly impartial. And throughout these years, unfortunately, successive Democratic and Republican administrations, their State Departments, who handed generous sums of money to diaspora Iranian society and civil society organizations and human rights organizations, what they ended up doing was that they created this milieu in which they too tried to co-opt human rights to advance the politics of certain factions inside Iran, with the exception of certain focus that certain of these civil society organizations had on, for instance, the rights of evangelical Christians in Iran, or the Baha'i, or the Jewish minority. A majority of them appeared to be, one way or the other, trying to kind of adjusting and aligning themselves with what a certain group or certain groups that sought just to reform the Islamic Republic. And in so doing, they ended up not being able to be the true voice of the Iranian people. We saw the shift in about 2018, 2019, when massacres took place with military-grade weaponry in broad daylight, that eventually we saw a shift by some of these human rights organizations. Unfortunately, it was too late as Trump came and all the funding for all these organizations and civil society stopped or was cut forever. We now see that there is a vacuum. But these people, yes, they should have reported every budget line item of whatever funding that they got to the State Department. But out of their own salaries, they could have created a rain day fund. And they never did that. None of them did that. And as a disclaimer, I did work for Tawana. I did teach for them civil society and minority groups politics. I did cover that for them. But perhaps Tawana was one of the very few ones that had a diverse pool of funders. So in my opinion, the fact that they have drawn a blank in terms of activism is partly because they put all their eggs in the literal and proverbial basket of the American Treasury and the State Department. And now we find it difficult. So now it has become incumbent upon people like you, Jian, or on Lisa, who have not been at the receiving end of these funds. And I wonder if we have to start a campaign ourselves, all the stakeholders, to be the voice of those people who do not get that coverage, who are being executed in cold blood by the IRGC in the dungeons of the Islamic Republic, abusing the fog of war, or what I'm now referring to it as the fog of ceasefire. And I never thought that I would ever try to merge fog of war and fog of ceasefire into the fog of ceasefire, because it seems that the ceasefire has created a curtain that now has descended upon the world public opinion. And I am so grateful that you raised this question.
I'm grateful that and I'm reminded that your rejoinders, your answers to questions are not only a revelation, but usually an education. You give us some history in the background. That said, I think I want to devote a whole show at some point on and not to scapegoat us, but on the responsibilities of the Iranian diaspora, because to a certain extent, I do believe that we've lost the plot too, to a certain extent. Maybe not you or Lisa, June, or myself, but I mean, when I'm looking in social media and I'm seeing Iranians talking about all kinds of things in a circular firing squad, to a certain extent, I mean, in the diaspora, and not talking about the atrocities that we should be focused on, I think that's an issue for us as well. Let me, however, move forward, because I want to get to the meat of where I wanted to go with today's episode, and that's who's in charge. And I actually want to walk through who's in charge in terms of the Islamic Republic regime right now, and then who is in charge in terms of who's calling the shots for this intervention in the U.S. administration right now, and then if we have time, to talk about the Iranian diaspora as well. So, with respect to the Islamic Republic regime, Lisa, there was an interesting comment that Vice President J.D. Vance, who of course is leading the negotiations now, made a couple of days ago, where he said, with some bravado, I have sat in front of the people who are the man who is effectively running the Islamic Republic. and which was a curious thing to say because, from what I understand, he was meeting with Ghalibaf and Roqe. Are they now running the Islamic Republic? Are they calling the shots for the regime? And if they're not, is it Mujtaba? And if so, where is he? So perhaps it's a billion-dollar question, but who's in charge?
It's interesting because behind the scenes, you also hear about how they all went to the negotiations for fear that anyone would be left behind and not considered a legitimate part of this current regime. For as long as it should last. Obviously, I want to remind people there's no legitimacy, among the Iranian people to have this gang of remnants be leading them. What's curious is two things. Number one, one of the things I grew up understanding is that in a pre-revolutionary Iran, neighbors were like family members, right? So, my mother always commented on, I grew up in New Jersey. She would always say, it's so odd to me that we don't know our neighbors. In Iran, they were like family members. You could rely on them. You would ask them for things that, they were there for each other. What the Islamic Republic did when they came in on day one is they big brothered the Iranian society. You didn't know who was among you. You didn't know who was going to report you. You didn't know who was going to call comité. You didn't know that's exactly what they did, was create paranoia among the Iranian people so that they would fall in line with this regime. Now, fast forward 47 years later, that's exactly what this war, and as of June, 12-day war, when there were such targeted attacks towards the heads of the nuclear program or IRGC or the government, then they started looking at one another. Are you a Mossad agent? Did you rat me out? Are you working with Israel? Are you working with the United States? And that's what we're seeing right now. Nobody trusts anybody else within their ranks. What are their ranks anyway? Even before any talk of war, there was a question of succession. Nobody knew who was going to truly be the successor to Khamenei. Khamenei, I mean, 9 lives is even too few. He wasn't going to die. I mean, people were wondering what kind of vitamins this guy is on because he was living on for a very long time. But there were discussions around it's not going to be his son, not clearly going to follow that line of succession. So, with regards to with J.D. Vance, he is giving formality to the actual process of negotiations. This is what diplomats do. This is what heads of state do. They sit down. Diplomacy is usually a good idea. But I truly believe that the United States knew that this was just a futile attempt. It was perhaps
you don't believe that he actually thinks those guys are in charge, does he?
No, and I don't think that Donald Trump thought that there was going to be a deal or he wouldn't have sent J.D. Vance. That's what I believe. That's just my personal opinion. I think this was an exercise in perhaps seeing where the regime is at, how far apart we are on different points of concession. We saw that.
So if they're saying like today, J.D. Vance, I think, said again, or perhaps it was President Trump, I don't remember, a deal looks possible. Is that just for the markets? I mean, what are they saying that for?
Perhaps. I mean, look, anything is possible. Is a deal possible? Sure, it's possible, but I don't believe that they would settle for a bad deal. So what does a good deal look like? I don't think it's going to look like anything that this regime would accept. Look, this regime was not built to be reformed. It was not built to accept any kind of compromise or concession or to make any sort of behavioral changes. It was meant to have weapons of mass destruction. It's meant to be rogue. It's meant to spread its ideology around the world. So if we want to even go back to your first question about human rights, look, this is the strategic communication that people like myself and you and anyone else who cares about Iran needs to focus on. We need the world to understand that everyone is in the line of fire of this regime. It's not just the Iranian people. It's not just Israel. It's not just the Persian Gulf Arab states that are now in the line of fire, but everyone. They are in every single continent trying to spread their brand of the Islamic State, which is a Shiite Islamic State. And if that is communicated well, the foregone conclusion is there is no deal to be had. So J.D. Vance can formalize the negotiations. He can say that I'm dealing with the heads of state, but what does that really mean? This is all a facade.
Dr. Kholdi, you want to take a swing at who's in charge of the Islamic Republic?
Yeah, I think the whole gang of IRGC, whatever that is left of them, Vahidi, Zolqadr, and Ghalibaf, they are all in charge. Whether or not Moshtaba Khamenei is alive or half dead or half living or in whatever format that he currently exists, realistically or surrealistically. And Sabah or IRGC have been in charge for almost the majority of the past 20 years. In fact, many people were saying that, and this is what I wrote for a member of G7, for a government member of G7 in 2020, when they asked me for a white paper, that despite the insistence of the embassy in Tehran that they saw former President Raisi as the natural successor to Khamenei, I acknowledged the insistence of the embassy and the Tehran sources, but I mentioned that it appears to me that Moshtaba Khamenei is a likely candidate because he is more in tune and in tandem with IRGC. Now that he's half dead or half alive or whatever that is, IRGC is in complete control. And the question remains as to how the present gang is going to decide. Obviously, they cannot decide even about southern Lebanon and Hezbollah very easily, because many of these IRGC commanders, including Soleimani himself, throughout the years have second or third wives in Lebanon, and vice versa. Hezbollah commanders have second or third wives in Iran. They have become so intertwined, these people, as a kleptocratic international criminal network, that it is impossible for them to allow for any sort of concession that would compromise the tight grip that they currently hold on the Iranian state.
Just on Moshtaba, I mean, if you remember, you would remember very well that the mantra for many years was, what happens if Khamenei dies? Not even if somebody takes him out the way it ended up happening, but if he just dies of natural causes or old age or something like that, could it be a game changer? Nobody's really having that conversation right now about Moshtaba Khamenei. Is he pretty much irrelevant at this point? Is this wasted oxygen to even talk about him?
I think so. Okay. I absolutely think so. Even if he is in one piece, which I doubt that he is, and totally awake and alive and conscious and not in a vegetative state, in my opinion, he is totally irrelevant. It is the IRGC mafia that is calling the shots.
Okay. Lisa, if we move this question to who's in charge to the U.S. administration, I mean, very clearly President Trump is in charge formally and certainly seems to like to think that, communicate that he's in charge. But earlier you said one of those things that we say about Trump, don't take him literally, take him figuratively, or watch what he does, etc. One of the other things that's been said about him for many years is that he listens to the last person who whispers in his ear, the last person he just heard from. And he certainly has a diverse group around him who we can now actively see have different opinions about whether to move this war forward, whether to stop, whether to run away and say we won. Who is he listening to these days? Who's whispering in his ear? And I guess in that case, who's really in charge?
Yeah, I mean, look, he has phenomenal military consultants and advisors, and I do believe that they've done a phenomenal job militarily thus far with the agenda that they set out for this war. I was just in Washington, D.C., and I sat on a panel actually with the Israeli ambassador to the United States, Dr. Yechiel Leiter, who said that the United States and Israel are lock in step in and have been in all parts of this war. And I'm just saying what he said in terms of strategy and moving forward. And I know the Israelis tend to be much more forthright than Donald Trump, who has us all over the place and really has kept all options on the table. And if we do take that to be true, then the Israelis are still speaking about regime collapse leading to regime change, and I would like to believe that that is still the goal of the United States. And while it may take time, I mean, again, I can't emphasize this enough. This may be 6 months from now, a year from now, but the end goal is perhaps the same.
Sorry, you'd like to believe it, but do you believe it? Do you believe that's part of?
I do.
Yeah.
The only reason I do is because, again, we're talking about a president who is against wars. He campaigned on ending forever wars, not getting into them. And I do believe that. Look, he cares about the markets. He cares about the midterms. He cares about oil prices. He cares about global security, global trade, all the things that he has always stood for. Really doesn't put him in a position to either take, again, a bad deal, meaning moving us backwards, globally, by even entering this war, or ending it abruptly, which would make it again a squandered opportunity. So I do believe that while it took him a month to even initiate this war, there had to be certain defense capabilities in place, there had to be certain strategy in place, but I do believe that he will stay the course in order to achieve what they set out to achieve. Again, I think people are being incredibly short-sighted and impatient. In terms of textbook foreign policy, he is doing what needs to be done, and that is leaving all options on the table and not allowing the adversary to understand what our next move is, but again, maintaining leverage. Right now, it has been communicated to the regime that we have our finger on the trigger and the United States can go right back to military war if there is, they don't come to a deal. And it looks like they won't come to a deal because of, again, how far they are in terms of those concessions that need to be made. If the United States' strategic imperative is no nuclear weapons for this regime, and they're not willing to give up those nuclear weapons, what are we talking about here? And we know, they know, the JCPOA was a failed attempt at trying to curb their nuclear ambition, and we gave them tons of money to put right into their terror proxies. So I think that lesson is behind us here in the United States. I think we understand what it means to give breathing space to this regime. They go back to spinning the centrifuges and amassing the weapons and amassing the drones and funding the proxies and killing the Iranian people. So I don't think anybody is unclear on the behavior or the nature of this regime. So I do believe that with time we will see us moving towards that position.
Well, Lisa, just while we're at it, for a long time, what I was hearing, if my sources, if you will, can be counted on, I mean, you tend to be much closer to the action, but I was hearing that J.D. Vance himself, the vice president, was one of the naysayers in terms of intervention. So putting him at the forefront seemed to me an indication that the Vance faction was winning over, say, the Rubios or Lindsey Grahams of the world that we've seen speak quite avidly about the Iranian people, etc., and for intervention. Should we read anything in the fact that J.D. Vance has a more prominent role now?
Well, let's start with the minimum and leave the conspiracy theories where they belong. But at the minimum, because J.D. Vance is somebody who is against this war, if he goes to the negotiating table and he comes back after 21 hours of not being able to come to a compromise when he absolutely wants a compromise, he wants an off-ramp and he wants this war to end, it makes a better argument to the American people that we're in this war for a reason. We cannot compromise with these people, we cannot trust them, and we need to either go back to war or put massive pressure on the remnants of this regime going forward. So I do think that it was a strategic move to send J.D. Vance. I wasn't surprised that he came back without a deal, but again, I do think it's a more powerful message when it's someone like him and not a Marco Rubio or a President Trump that are viewed as more hawkish when it comes to this war and understanding the adversary.
Dr. Kholdi, let me bring you in on this. If it's about who's whispering in Trump's ear most successfully, who do you believe is in charge when it comes to the U.S. administration at this point in this process?
Well, honestly, I would follow Sonnenfeld's Ten Commandments of Trump on that point, and I pretty much agree with Lisa on most of these points. However, uh, Donald J. Trump also likes the lowest hanging fruit to declare victory. So he might actually declare some sort of a general understanding as a victory in order to satiate and appease the MAGA movement as well as the likes of J.D. Vance. But he's not going to undermine Marco Rubio and other war hawks that he has had at his disposal because he very well knows that any agreement, be it the Algiers agreement that the Islamic Republic signed in order to have the American hostage diplomats. The diplomats who were hostages in Iran released to other agreements. The Islamic Republic has always cheated, has always broken any such agreement, any such pact, any such, I would say, some sort of a rapprochement that it has arrived at with the Americans. So what happens is that Trump is still sending George H.W. Bush to the region. Trump is still sending all these troops there. Why? Because even if he goes to Pakistan, even if he signs it in a ceremony, he knows that this regime is a kleptocratic militarist regime. Down the road, weeks, months, it will do something stupid. And he will need to bring to bear the preponderance that he currently has again in order to put them in their place. So it's the question of once you fool me, twice you fool me. So it is this that makes Trump a little bit jittery. And this is why we are getting all sorts of mixed signals. We hear one thing from Hexet, we see one thing in Truth Social, we see ceasefire with Hezbollah and all sorts of things. All that I can say at this point is that thank goodness that the Iranian people have the most reliable allies in the universe in the person of Israel, be it Netanyahu or any other government that might succeed him, because Israel knows the Islamic Republic, IRGC, better than Trump, better than any American. And if they ever fall asleep or become too drunk by some of these apparent victories, the Israelis will awaken them to the fact that, oh, these people are doing something else. And satellite images right now are showing that the Islamic Republic is trying to dug out all those missile launchers and others. You wouldn't do that if you are negotiating with goodwill. Obviously, you are negotiating with ill will. You are negotiating because you are not truly committed to a ceasefire that would lead to a sustainable agreement with the United States. And it has become a question of them trying to deal with the hyenas that they have basically bred over the past 20 years. All these IRGC mid-ranking officers who want revenge for the killing of their supreme leader, who still think that they need to get more money out of whatever they are doing. And these people are not going to agree FTT and all sorts of other World Bank and international anti-money laundering officials to come and monitor all the activities of the Iranian banking system that has been the major hub of their international money laundering and criminal activities. So one way or the other, even if they come up with the most general agreement that Donald Trump can put his beautiful signature at the bottom of it, this thing is not going to last. And I'm afraid it will not even see the end of the summer if it ever happens.
It's interesting you should say that, because I want to get to a final question to you both about the about the Iranian diaspora and what you're hoping to see or expecting to see in the coming days. But just on this note, on Monday's show, I asked a similar question of our panel, your colleague Shayan Sami and Sadiq Bigdeli and Ali Hamedani, and I was asking them, it seems a little counterintuitive. I mean, why if the point of if this Islamic regime, if our whole notion of these people is that they'll do anything possible to retain and maintain power, including, of course, murdering innocent Iranian civilians, young people, etc. Why don't they just agree on the nukes? I was asking that panel. I mean, I'm curious to get a short answer from you on that, Dr. Kholdi. I mean, why wouldn't they just say, okay, we won't do it. Here's the nuclear uranium stuff. If that means they get a pass and they get to be the despotic regime they are for another 30 years, why wouldn't they take that deal?
Well, if I want to use Trump vernacular, it's because they won't have any cards. And unlike whatever people are saying that Iran is going to become another North Korea or Venezuela, I think they are, Ghalibaf and IRGC are thinking of a Burmese kind of solution, that they would be a military junta. For the appearance of it, they would bring out of jail some reformist-minded activist or someone and put them on their cabinet or something and pretend that they are changing, and then they would resume whatever that they dastardly activities that they were doing, because this is a kleptocracy. It is not used to being normal. It is like expecting Al Capone to become the president of the Ford company at the end of the Second World War. It has not happened.
But if you say to Al Capone, if you say to Al Capone, we'll let you stay in power and we won't put you in jail, and I mean that's if it means they can retain their position, it's just interesting to me. I mean, the Sadiq Bigdeli's answer on Monday was that they're too ideological, they're too committed to this, to their, and that they'll lose the zombie, the ideological zombie army inside Iran. Lisa, I'm curious to get
when people say this regime is too ideological, I laugh, only because if they were truly committed to the ideology that they spew, their children and grandchildren wouldn't be in bikinis and yachts in Europe and the United States.
No, sorry. They meant sorry. I don't want to misstate what he was. I think where he was going with it. That's not about him. They have to keep the followers believing that that's what he was saying.
Look, the jig is up, so to speak. You saw protests in clerical cities, in Qom, in Mashhad, in places where traditionally you would have an 80 to 90% following large constituency of the government. Well, either their checks ran out or they know that this ideology is complete BS and they want better for their children. And for the future of Iran. So, look, I don't buy that this ideology is something that they absorb. I think it's something that has maintained their hegemon. I think it's something that is infallible. This is us. This is our ideology, and that is what they maintain. Two things.
But aren't you the one weren't you? Maybe I misunderstood you earlier. Weren't you saying that they're messianic? That this is what they're committed to, is spreading their gospel, etc. Isn't that?
No, they want to spread. They want to spread their power and their reign. I don't think they use that ideology to spread, just like ISIS did. ISIS was about, collecting, and amassing land and creating a caliphate. People who they want to that power, but it's not necessarily that they're at home, memorizing Sharia law and then the Quran. It's just the two don't necessarily go together.
Right, I got you.
And again, it's a bastardization of Islam, and there's no disrespect to those who actually are followers and believe in and practice the religion. So they're Pol Pot sitting watching satellite TV while everybody else is told it's year zero, right? Yeah, I got you. It's crazy to me because they have this. There's two parts to this. On the one hand, yes, they can easily want to rebrand in order to survive, right? Because again, they're not committed to anything. They just want to survive and stay in power because, as we see, it's very lucrative. They're all worth millions of dollars. their loved ones are here in the United States, whether they're in Los Angeles or Beverly Hills, going on shopping sprees and driving luxury cars like they are in Europe. So it's very lucrative, it's powerful, they want to stay in power. On the other hand, they would need to walk away from the negotiating table or from this war with a win. Every time that this regime comes away, they go back and they want to get people to rally around the flag. And that is the calculation they have right now, just like they got involved in the Iran-Iraq war. They wanted a win in order to come back and really fortify their power back at home. Right now, I don't see that happening. I see them being an illegitimate government in Iran among the people. So I do think, they may be trying to play out the clock. They may be trying to win at the negotiating table. And I will say this. They're very smart for trying to use their weapon of choice. That's where they excel, at the negotiating table, not on the battlefield.
Huh.
And they got the Americans to get them to, again, their weapon of choice, which is sitting down and trying to run circles around the Trump administration the way they did with President Biden and President Obama. But here we are. I think if you want me to get into the diaspora a bit, I think it's very, very important for the diaspora to be alert, aware of the psyops, of the different campaigns that are out there to try to divide the diaspora. I've seen so many Iranians fall for it. I'm seeing their posts on X, I'm seeing their posts on Instagram, and I'm like, oh God,
Well, that is a perfect segue. My question was going to be in it. I know I can't keep you guys here forever, so let me just get you a second last quick question on this, on the diaspora. My question was going to be, do you feel like, and I know we all have our predilections, and I think we're all on the record as actually believing that the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi is the correct person for the at least to oversee a transition. So I'm going to ask you to be as objective as you can as analysts on this, but if I look at it and say this week, okay, there was the appearance in Sweden, there was an appearance in Italy. It looks like there's traction in some ways for the Crown Prince, etc. But in contradistinction to, say, a month ago or a couple of months ago, where it really felt like there was alignment in the diaspora, if not with Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi around the Lion and Son, or around the intentions of all of this, there has been, and in no short reason for no short partly because of what you're saying, Lisa, in terms of dodgy actors coming in and creating narratives, etc. There seems more division from where I'm sitting now. There seems to be more confusion. There seems to be people who are hearing, advancing different things. There's certainly been a campaign against Reza Pahlavi. There's been a lot of people now jumping on this sort of like an anti-war, quote unquote, position. So I'm curious where you see the diaspora now as an analyst, and whether you worry about the alignment that was there a month ago, maybe not being as strong now. Lisa, and then Dr. Kholdi.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely correct to point that out. I think the waters have been muddied, certainly, and that's really with any sort of campaign. People are not on the same high that they were within the first weeks of the military campaign, where all you saw was Shiro Khorshid, Lion and Sun flags around Los Angeles. Certainly, I know they were in Toronto. They were, all over, having, that kind of that solidarity. Here in the diaspora, it was finally, we have a future away from this regime, and that's all it needed to mean at that moment. Here, yes, now, every time there is a twist or turn or an upset, people, they change their positioning. This war was for nothing. It actually will set the Iranian people back. The anti-war kind of talking points have become much more popular. Those who hated Donald Trump and then kind of were like, oh, okay, if he's going to bring about regime change in Iran, I'll forgive him. I'll jump on board. But then when one thing goes wrong, they're like, oh, I knew it. Donald Trump never gets anything right, et cetera, et cetera. Again, the best battlefield for the regime is the battlefield of ideas, the narrative war. And they have always used that to their advantage. Years ago, they even put more money into their cyber military than they did their actual military. And that's all you need to know about the kind of division that they're sowing here in the West. between their hacking campaigns and threatening people like myself, and I'm sure both of you, trying to silence us, and then dividing people, right? Obviously, whether they're followers of Reza Pahlavi, whether it's coming from other opposition groups or it's coming straight from the regime, they're out there. So I do caution people, stay on target. And the only target is the collapse of this regime leading to regime change.
Okay.
And really stay with people who have been squeaky clean this whole time. I'm sure you know who those people are. People who've never wavered, who have never had an agenda, who aren't being paid by anybody and can be trusted.
Yeah.
And the reason I objectively put my support publicly and otherwise behind Reza Pahlavi is because he is a squeaky clean persona. And what does that mean? He can be trusted by the United States, he can be trusted by Israel, and he can be that bridge. He can be that segue. He can be the transitional leader to a future that can be democratic and secular, which is what the Iranian people want.
Yeah, I like to say it's not just that we know what he is. We know what he is not, what he hasn't been for the last 50 years in terms of where his support lies, etc.
He's been very clear on letting the Iranian people determine their destiny. He does not want to speak for them. He wants to allow them to choose. And I think that's an integral part of that.
Of course, there's a subset of people who will say that he doesn't really mean that,
Of course, they want to know. Yeah,
he says that, but
that's not what he said. His father's this. I know.
Yes. Dr. Kholdi, do you want to just weigh in on this at all before we go to a final?
Can I just quickly harken back for 30 seconds to the previous question?
Sure.
Because I don't think that I managed to. You asked about ideological zeal of the present gang that rules Iran. And of course, the manner by which they behave differently when it comes to many things, including their own children and offspring's lives outside Iran. American philosopher George Santayana has said that something to this effect. A fanatic is a tyrant on principle and often a hypocrite in practice. We are dealing with fanatics, and kleptocratic fanatics know that they need money in order to turn people into their stooges. But money in its own right is not enough. They need to have some sort of an ideology to mobilize them, to inspire them. And especially now that they have lost their supreme leader and they have some sort of a semi-alive supreme leader, they even need that ideology even more. So they cannot disenthrall themselves from it. But back to the diaspora thing, I absolutely agree with Lisa. I'm a principled constitutional monarchist. I'm not a fanatic. And I believe that there is a case to be made for Reza Pahlavi as constitutional monarch. However, he has been adamant that he doesn't want to assume this office either now or later. And he is adamant that he just wants to be the leader for transition. And when that is the case, and this is how this person is presenting himself, to say that, Khomeini was like that in 1979, with all due respect, the people who are supporting him, first of all, more than 90% of them were not even alive then. Right. But a lot of the elite who are alive right now were the revolutionaries in 1979. They were the ones who were deceived by Khomeini.
Right.
And now they are saying that they are not going to be deceived by Reza Pahlavi. Reza Pahlavi is not a religious leader. He cannot issue a fatwa. He doesn't have that kind of fanatical ideology or doctrine in order to be able to mesmerize people the way Khomeini mesmerized these old men. A majority of them are men who were mostly communists or left-leaning or whatnot, and were only united in their hatred of Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. So the question is that what we can do with the rank and file diaspora people, a majority of whom grew up under the Islamic Republic, for whatever reason escaped the Islamic Republic, and how we can help this remain a force that keeps, in a democratic sense, all the countries that are they are now citizens or residents of accountable to whatever that is happening to Iran. And I think we need a certain degree of organization and personal sacrifice. And we need community leaders. And people like Lisa, in my opinion, are the best leaders that we have, and we need more of them. And the more we can organize, the more we can present ourselves as a voting bloc in a highly polarized Western democratic universe, that even the vote of, yes, we are not Indians, we are not Chinese, we don't have millions of voters that we can use, but in fact, we can determine the fate of small ridings with the very few votes that we have in a very polarized political environment.
Yeah.
We have to be able to capitalize on that in order to be able to be the true voice of the Iranian people.
Okay. There's so much I want to ask about that and move on about that, but we'll bring you back to do that. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I'm going to leave it there. I appreciate you both. Much more to ask both of you. We'll bring you both back. Thank you for taking the time today. Merci, Varan. Khudafiz.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much to Lisa and to Shahram for that, for joining us again. We're two of our guests that we really appreciate on this program. They have perspectives that you may or may not agree with. If you do not, or if you do, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at info@roqemedia.com, info@roqemedia.com, or you can obviously post your opinions as you do on any of our platforms. We love to hear from you on YouTube, on Apple, on Spotify, Telegram, Instagram, etc. Once again, happy birthday to Roqe. This is our 6th anniversary, and happy birthday to one of our core members, Super P, Parisa. Happy birthday. Hope it's an amazing one. You keep getting better. This is Full Time for Roqe for this edition. Thanks to the amazing core team who put this show together twice a week. The birthday girl, Super Parisa Sanjarani, Savvy, Roham Maher, and the photo and video queen, Tina Farahi. Special thanks as well to Smart Pega, Charming Kimia, Talented Anahita, Methodical Kaveh, and The Rising Keon. Thank you to all of you out there for supporting us and sharing our content. If you haven't subscribed on any of our platforms, it's been 6 years. Come on now. You can subscribe. It's free on any of our platforms. We'd love you to get notified of when our new content comes out. You can find us on Instagram at Roqe Media. You can find me on Instagram at Jian Ghomeshi. And as ever, this is in the immortal words of my Uncle Behra. I've been telling you this for 6 years now. Mizun Bashi.